各位朋友，大家好。Good morning. 我今天早上可能要讲英文比较好，不然的话我要用1个小时讲完我要讲的事情。Here you have one of the international lists of the eco sectors, the green sectors of the economy that goes from waste management to water management, protection of biodiversity and landscapes. There are other lists, larger, bigger. You can't see this, but that's done in purpose. And there are different possibilities of the number of products including and under the idea green products. 25, 54, 164, depending on the institutions who talk about these eco products. But really what I want to say this morning is that we need to go beyond these lists. And what we need to talk about is the green side of the economy, which has to be everywhere. We have to green the economy on the whole. It's not only about these eco sectors. It's about a greener way of producing and trading. It's about greener products that include less pollution, less CO2 emissions, less use of energy in the production process, but also in the usage of the products. So we have to include cars, for example, as products that need to become greener in the future, home appliances, but also green buildings, organic agriculture. The objective here is really to green the whole economy. Now that I'm done with the definitions, let's jump into the question. Well, how do we see this? How do we see the climate change, the environment questions, and the green economy in the EU? First, let's talk about the public opinion. Here, it's the latest opinion poll that we've made in Europe about whether people consider that it is important to protect the environment. So we asked the question to our people. Just a reminder, in the European Union, we've got 28 countries, 500 million people. We are the largest economy in the world, and we regularly ask questions and check the state of our public opinion. And here they say, very important, 53% of our people think that protecting the environment is important. 42% think that it is fairly important. So if you add the two together, you've got more than 90% of the population in Europe who consider that protecting the environment is very important or fairly important. And if we ask the question, how do you see climate change? Then we also have a very clear consensus in the public opinion. 69% of our people think that it is a very serious problem, climate change, and 21% think that it is a fairly serious problem. Here again, if you add the two together, you've got more than 90% of the population in Europe who consider climate change as a very serious or fairly serious problem. Now, this is a list, it's very small, sorry. This is a list of the main environmental issues that people in Europe think are the priority. They are the most worried about. Air pollution, water pollution, chemical use, growing amount of waste, depletion of natural resources are the first 5 ones. The reason I showed this to you, because most of you are business people in this room, the reason I showed this to you is because these are the subjects, the issues of worry for the European people, but these are also your future business opportunities. These are the sectors in which the greatest possibilities for development of your businesses will appear in the EU in the years to come. Now, second pack of questions. Do we have to choose the green or the economy? Is there a contradiction between pursuing a better protection of the environment and developing our economies? Still, in most cases, people think that it is the case, that there is a contradiction. In Europe, when we ask our population what they think, they say first that they are ready to sacrifice some of their economic well-being for better environmental well-being. For example, here, if we say, are you ready to pay more, or should the government pay more to have a better environmentally friendly public procurement? 60% of the people say yes, we should pay more for more environmentally friendly services. Now, let me talk about one other aspect of the EU's public opinion, and that's the very radical environmental protection NGOs. And this is what they say. They say the EU should set a single emission reduction target in 2030. And they say we strongly support global efforts to reduce emission, and we urge governments and the European Commission to achieve an ambitious international climate agreement in 2015. Whatever the outcome of the international climate negotiation in 2015, the EU should set a binding 2030 emissions reduction target. Okay? So that's the pressure that the NGOs, the radical NGOs, put on the EU government. But no, actually, this is not the radical view from the NGOs. This is the report from last year's from Business Europe. Business Europe is the European lobby of the European industries. They represent 41 national associations of industries coming from 35 European countries. They are the European Chamber of Commerce. They represent the interest of the business in Europe. And this is what the European business tells the European government. They are putting pressure on us governments to adopt stricter rules, stricter regulation, stricter targets, stricter standards on climate change for 2030. So see, we've seen what the public opinion thinks in Europe. Now I'm telling you what the business thinks in Europe. And this is one of the elements that makes us strong on the green economy. We have a very strong consensus across the board, from the public opinion to the green NGOs, to the business people. So, indeed, what we need is the green and the economy, not the green or the economy. And we can do both. We are convinced that this actually is helping. To go more environmental is helping us to become more competitive, to remain on top, and to keep our position as leaders in terms of economic development. Once again, let me refer to the public opinion. We ask our people, the protection of the environment can boost economic growth in the EU. Do you think that's correct? So, protection of the environment will boost the economy in the EU. And they say, totally agree, 29%. They're a bit less sure about this, huh? There's a bit of an uncertainty, a bit of a doubt, a bit of a worry about this. But still, 29% think, yeah, they totally agree. 45% tend to agree. So here again, we've got a very strong 75% of the population who think there is a positive connection between being more environmentally friendly and boosting our economy. If I go to Business Europe again here, that's the same report published last year that was pushing the governments to adopt very strong targets for 2030 in terms of climate change. The Business Europe says this: the EU has an excellent track record in environmental protection, also thanks to the innovation capacity of its businesses. This has enabled technological progress and job creation, also in new markets. In the period 1990 to 2010, the EU reduced its emissions by around 17% compared with 1990 levels, while the EU GDP increased by 41%. Today, many EU industrial sectors are global leaders in terms of energy efficiency and emission reductions. And I'm going to show one graph, which is this clear illustration of this process. Here, you've got the EU GDP from 1990 to 2012. You see that the EU GDP has grown by roughly 45% in this period. This red line is the emissions of greenhouse gases from the EU. And you see that the reduction is almost reaching 20% since 1990. The GHG intensity is the relationship between how much emissions you have to produce €1 of your GDP. And you see that the GHG intensity of our economy has also diminished. It's the result of these two lines added together, actually. So what this shows is that we have successfully decoupled our economic growth and our GHG emissions. We can grow more, we can become richer, we can develop our economic well-being while we reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases. And of course, this is not only valid for the European Union, this is valid for the whole world, and it can work out everywhere. I will give you just a few more examples and figures of what happened over this period of time in Europe. Buildings which are built now in Europe will use 50% less energy as compared to buildings which were built 25 years ago. They're very good, they're better, much better, and they use 50% less energy now than 25 years ago in their lifetime as buildings. The industry is 19% less energy intensive nowadays than 20 years ago. 90% energy intensity diminution. Now, the eco-industries themselves, if you look at only the ones who are the green economy in the narrow sense of the term I indicated at the beginning, they grow 6 to 8% per year. That's more than double the average growth of the EU GDP over the past few years. They accounted for 3 million jobs in 2002. They now account for 4.2 million jobs in Europe. The renewable energy sector is growing by 13% per year. The recycled material sector is growing by 18% a year. So really, these are the areas in which the growth is the most significant. These are the areas where we can make business and make money. Just one last example with figures that I can give to you. Environmental related services. We are requesting our people to build buildings which are better than before. There are very strict regulations, and the regulations are getting stricter year after year. We need to train people, the builders, to know how to insulate buildings and how to build energy-efficient buildings. In the construction sector, this means that there are training requirements for 4 million workers in the European Union, and this also means business for people who are in charge of training construction workers. Now, how do we boost the green economy? Now, what is the future plan? Regulatory boosters, and that's, we're responding to the request from the industry to set stricter targets for us all. I'm going to give you EU climate change, la NEMPA, that will be in one slide. It's a world premiere. Nobody has explained the EU climate change energy in just one slide. But we have something to say now, because as Bernd has just explained to you, we have just decided 2 weeks ago at the EU level our targets for 2030. All right? So our targets for 2020 are fairly well known now. For GHG emissions of the EU, our target is to reduce them by 20%. We know that we will reach this target because we have almost reached the target already. So by 2020, definitely, we will have reduced our target, our emissions by 20%. Our target for 2030, just adopted by our heads of state and government, is minus 40%. It's a very ambitious target, but the 2050 targets that we have are even more ambitious because we want to reduce our GHG emissions by 80 to 95%. This is very ambitious, but this is not unfeasible. And it is absolutely crucial that we now give to the European industry a roadmap for 20 to 50 years so that the European industry knows where to invest, where to put the money, where to start preparing for all these changes which will take place. Targets for renewable energy. For 2020, we wanted to have 20% of our whole energy production coming from renewable energies. This target is more difficult to reach. We're not there yet. We're about 13%, 14% now. So we've got only 6 years to bridge the gap. It's going to be difficult, we know this, but we have to make an effort. And the target for 2030 that we just set is 27% of our total energy production coming from renewable energy. And energy efficiency, we also have a target of plus 20% in the whole economy for 2020, plus 27% for 2030. How do we do that? We've got two main tools. The first big tool you heard about is the emission trading system. It's the EU's carbon market. This covers about 50% of our total emissions, and this allows us to give industry a bit of flexibility. We give the industry a global target, but carbon rights, emission rights can be exchanged between industries so that the industries that are slower can still continue to grow by buying rights from the industry that are quicker in reducing their emissions. So the EU emission trading system, the EU carbon market, accounts for about 50% of our total emissions, and it's the most important tool we have to reach these very ambitious targets. Beyond the carbon market, we also have specific regulations on sectors. For example, cars. We're going to talk about cars later this morning. For example, cars, we have just set a new target for emission reduction in cars in 2021, which is very tough. But here again, the objective is not to put the industry down on its knees. The industry has flexibility. The targets we set are for the whole fleet of car makers so that they can continue to produce very high-end and very high energy consumption car at the same time as, generally speaking, they reduce their total energy consumption. We also have specific targets for and rules for buildings, etc. Beyond all this, we also use a lot of research. We've got an EU research program called Horizon 2020, which focuses a lot on energy, green economy, environment protection, innovation. We also, of course, it's not the EU only, it's a world question, and we've got a very active role to play in the international negotiations on climate change. You may know that the next step, the next objective is to have, by 2015, the end of next year, a new global agreement which will cover the period from 2020, after 2020. And we are very active trying to make sure that this agreement will take place. Green trade also is important to be able to exchange green goods in a better way. we are developing at the moment in the WTO a new green goods initiative. The negotiations started in Geneva in July 2014, last July. It's a negotiation that includes all the members of the European Union itself, but also the APEC members. That includes Taiwan. There is a green goods initiative in APEC to reduce the tariffs to 5% on a number of green goods. That's the APEC initiative. The WTO initiative is even more ambitious, and we would like to reduce to zero the tariff, to eliminate the tariffs on a larger range of goods than what has been achieved by APEC so far. So that's a very ambitious and very useful initiative that will boost, hopefully, the trade in green goods. Now, this, by the way, is the evolution of trade in environmental goods from 2001 to 2012, and you see that it's also, in terms of international trade, a very big trend. Leading exporters, you can see Taiwan here. Where is it? Here. Taiwan is not badly placed in terms of export of green goods. So Taiwan has a strong interest in making sure that this WTO green goods initiative also works out. But before I end, I would like to add just one. I'm finished with my time, so I should stop talking now. But I just want to add something about the EU-Taiwan situation here. My conviction, my certainty is that we will have a lot of opportunities for developing EU-Taiwan green trade volumes in the coming years, in particular due to the fact that the EU is very ambitious, as you have just seen. There will be, for Taiwanese industries, a lot of trading opportunities in these sectors. But there will be also a lot of investment opportunities in Europe. I will encourage definitely EU and Taiwanese industries to cooperate more, because I think that there will be also opportunities for industrial cooperations between the two sides on the green economy and green trade. And also, in the field of research and development, join the efforts that are being spearheaded by the European Union. There are a lot of things that we can do together. There are a lot of research opportunities that we can develop between Taiwan and the EU, whether industry, research centers, universities, etc. Now, as for Taiwan itself, my feeling, and I'm an external sort of witness of what is happening in Taiwan, my feeling is that Taiwan has probably not reached yet the level of consensus that we have in Europe. I think the population in Taiwan is very much on the same page as our population. We see this in opinion polls. We see this also in the reaction of the population to things like Kanjian Taiwan, the film that was made public last year, which produced such a big reaction from the population. I also think that the government in Taiwan is very much conscious and very much mobilized to move towards the green economy and green trade. But I think that probably, and maybe I'm wrong, but my feeling is that the industry is probably not as enthusiastic about this, and this has a negative effect on the decisions taken in the legislative yuan. I think that the message from the industry to the legislators is not very positive on green economy, green trade, environment protection. And my fear is that Taiwan is taking a risk, the risk of not being competitive in a few years if it does not adopt really ambitious rules and regulations for its industry and for its economy. You know, I just want to remind everybody of 一个成语塞翁失马. The feeling we have in Europe is maybe we are losing one horse at this moment because we're imposing on our industry very tough regulations. But in a few years, we will have a lot of horses coming back to us. And if you keep your horse too tight on a leash at the moment, maybe you will have no horses in a few years. So that's the conclusion of my talk this morning. Thank you very much for your attention.